In the spring of 1940, Luftwaffe pilots took to the skies over Western Europe with the swagger of a force that believed itself unstoppable. Their Messerschmitt Bf-109s were faster, sleeker, and, on paper, technologically unmatched. To the German High Command, the British Hurricane was a relic. A throwback to biplane engineering, its fabric-covered fuselage and thick wings viewed as an embarrassment to modern aerodynamics. In Berlin's briefing rooms, reports labeled it obsolete before it flew. But in the months to come, that same obsolete machine would prove that combat, not theory, decides superiority. When war erupted over France and the Low Countries, the first real clash between the RAF and Luftwaffe began. On May 10th, as panzer columns rolled toward the Channel, squadrons of Hurricanes scrambled to meet waves of German bombers and their fighter escorts. The British pilots, many barely in their 20s, faced odds that seemed impossible. Yet they carried an advantage their adversaries couldn't see from the drawing board. The Hurricane was rugged, forgiving, and reparable. Its wide undercarriage could land on fields that would snap the spindly legs of a Messerschmitt. And while the Germans prized precision engineering, the British prized endurance. By mid-May, air combat over Belgium and northern France had become a daily ritual of chaos. The Bf-109s could dive faster, climb steeper, and hit harder at altitude. But down low, where most battles were actually fought, the Hurricane could turn tighter and hold steady even when riddled with holes. German pilots returning from sorties began to report something unexpected. Hurricanes that refused to fall, even after long bursts of 20mm cannon fire. Ground crews at forward airstrips worked through the night patching bullet-torn wings with doped fabric, rearming the Brownings, and sending the same aircraft back up before dawn. What the Luftwaffe mistook for an obsolete design was, in truth, a machine built to take punishment and keep flying. When the British Expeditionary Force began its retreat to Dunkirk, Hurricanes became the thin line shielding the beaches. They faced hundreds of German aircraft each day, diving through bomber formations, scattering Heinkels and Dorniers, while Spitfires handled the high cover. It was here, in the smoke and chaos of Dunkirk, that the myth of the Hurricane's obsolescence began to unravel. The Germans had the advantage of speed, but the British had the advantage of staying power. And by the time the last soldiers left the beaches, the Luftwaffe's engineers were beginning to ask the question no one in Berlin wanted to hear. Why were their modern fighters losing to a plane the British designed before the war even started? When the evacuation at Dunkirk ended, the RAF had lost nearly 500 Hurricanes, but their reputation had changed completely. What began as a desperate withdrawal had, paradoxically, demonstrated that the obsolete fighter could survive the worst beating modern air power could deliver. The Hurricanes that limped back across the Channel were patched, refueled, and flown again within days. Factories in Hawker's Kingston plant worked around the clock, turning out replacements faster than Germany's intelligence believed possible. Meanwhile, in occupied France, the Luftwaffe took stock. The German pilots were shocked by the resilience of their opponents. They had expected to sweep British aircraft aside with superior technology, but instead found themselves facing pilots who fought with stubborn, close-range aggression. Many engagements ended with Bf-109s returning home low on fuel, pursued by Hurricanes that should have been in pieces. Reports began circulating among Luftwaffe too that the RAF's second-line fighter had an uncanny ability to reappear after being shot down the day before. By July, as the Battle of Britain loomed, the Hurricane formed the backbone of fighter command. Of the 715 operational fighters available on the eve of the battle, over two-thirds were Hurricanes. While the Spitfire drew headlines for its speed and elegance, it was the Hurricane that would bear the real weight of the defense. Ground crews at sector airfields like Biggin Hill and Tangmere developed an almost ritual rhythm. Rearm, refuel, patch the bullet holes with linen, and send them back up. When the Luftwaffe began its opening raids across the Channel in early July, the first large-scale engagements pitted the obsolete Hurricane against the most experienced Jagdgeschwader in Europe. Yet, to the shock of German squadron leaders, losses mounted quickly. Hurricanes absorbed cannon shells that would have shattered an all-metal aircraft. They burned, yes, but many pilots lived to fight another day, bailing out or landing battered machines in friendly fields. For every Hurricane destroyed, another seemed to rise in its place. In Berlin, Technical officers tried to explain the discrepancy. On paper, the Bf-109 still held every advantage: speed, climb rate, and high-altitude power. But the numbers from France and Dunkirk didn't lie. Something about the Hurricane's simplicity had become its strength. It could be built faster, flown by less experienced pilots, and fixed with a hammer instead of a factory order. As July faded into August, the Germans changed their approach. Now, they would bring the full weight of their air power against southern England and finally put Britain's flying anachronism to rest. By the first week of August 1940, the Battle of Britain was no longer a prediction, it had begun. German formations filled the Channel sky, sleek bombers in tight formations flanked by ranks of Bf-109s and twin-engine Bf-110s. Their orders were to break the RAF before invading England itself. At first, Berlin's confidence remained absolute. The Hurricane, they insisted, was too slow, too heavy, too outdated to stand against the Luftwaffe's new doctrine of lightning assault. But the men of Fighter Command had other plans. The strategy was simple yet brilliant. Air Vice Marshal Keith Park assigned the faster Spitfires to meet the German fighters head-on, while the Hurricanes, slower but steadier, dived into the bomber streams. The 8 Browning machine guns on each Hurricane fired in a concentrated cone of fire that could shred a Heinkel or Dornier in seconds. Every engagement followed the same brutal pattern. The Spitfires distracted the escorts. The Hurricanes tore the bombers apart. The Germans soon learned that when a group of brown and green silhouettes approached from below, their defensive gunners had seconds to live. In mid-August, during Eagle attack, the Luftwaffe launched its largest assault to date, 1,485 sorties in a single day. They expected to smash the RAF's airfields and crush its will. Instead, they found an opponent that refused to yield. Hurricanes from 32, 56, and 85 squadrons rose from grass strips still scarred from previous raids. Many aircraft had patches of doped fabric still drying on their wings. In the chaos of the fight, one Hurricane was seen losing an aileron yet still managing to down a bomber before limping home. That resilience baffled the Germans. By August 15th, later known as Black Thursday, the Luftwaffe faced its first major reckoning. Believing northern Britain to be undefended, they sent massive raids from Norway and Denmark. What they met instead were squadrons of Hurricanes waiting in ambush over Yorkshire and Tyneside. 30 German aircraft were destroyed in a single day, many by pilots who had never before seen combat. The message was unmistakable. The obsolete fighter had become the workhorse of Britain's defense. Even senior Luftwaffe officers began to reassess. The Hurricane, while slower, could outturn the Bf-109 below 15,000 feet and held its firepower longer. In close combat, it was a brawler, less graceful than the Spitfire but deadlier in a knife fight. As German pilots soon realized, in the thick, turning battles over the Channel, victory didn't belong to the fastest machine, but to the one that could take a hit and stay in the sky. And now, as August turned toward September, the Hurricanes would face their greatest test. The all-out assault on London itself. By September 1940, the Luftwaffe shifted strategy. No longer content with airfields and radar sites, Göring ordered London itself to burn. The change was meant to draw the RAF into open battle and crush it once and for all. But what the Germans didn't realize was that this decision would give the Hurricanes the fight they were built for. The dense bomber formations that streamed toward the capital each day were exactly the kind of target Hawker's design excelled at destroying. On September 7th, the first daylight raid over London filled the sky with hundreds of bombers. Hurricanes from squadrons across the southeast scrambled to intercept. They climbed through columns of smoke rising from the Thames docks and cut straight into the heart of the bomber streams. Pilots recalled seeing the enemy as a solid wall of metal. At point-blank range, 8 Brownings created a storm of fire that ripped through Heinkel wings and sent engines trailing smoke into the clouds. Despite the chaos, the Hurricanes maintained discipline. Diving in pairs, firing in short bursts, and breaking away just as the next section entered the fight. Then came September 15th, what history now remembers as the decisive turning point of the Battle of Britain. The Luftwaffe launched its largest assault yet, more than 1,500 sorties in a single day. At noon, radar plots showed the sky thick with enemy contacts. Churchill himself watched from the operations room at Uxbridge as the colored markers tracked wave after wave approaching London. Every available fighter was scrambled. The Hurricanes went first, climbing hard into sunlight. What followed was a furious, hour-long melee that stretched from Kent to the capital. Over the Thames, Hurricanes of No. 303 Squadron, flown by Polish pilots, cut through German bomber formations with ruthless precision. Others from No. 501 and 242 squadrons dove in from altitude, turning the sky into a blizzard of tracers. When the fighting ended, more than 50 German aircraft were downed, 15 of them by Hurricane pilots. The Luftwaffe had thrown everything at Britain that day, but it broke against the same aircraft Berlin once mocked as obsolete. That evening, as Churchill visited the control room again, he was told the RAF still had reserves waiting to scramble. The Germans never knew how close they had come, or how far they had failed. For the first time since the war began, the myth of Luftwaffe invincibility cracked. The Hurricanes had held the line, and Britain still stood. But even victory had its price, and the lessons the Hurricane taught were written not in triumph, but in endurance. In the weeks following September 15th, the Luftwaffe's momentum collapsed. Night raids replaced daylight ones, but the result was the same. Britain endured. For the Hurricane, the Battle of Britain marked both its finest hour and the start of a new chapter. Across the airfields of southern England, the aircraft that had defended the nation stood in rows, patched, burned and battered, yet still airworthy. Mechanics who had worked under constant bombardment now had time to breathe, though not much. Within days, new orders sent Hurricanes abroad, to Egypt, to Malta, and to the frozen airfields of Murmansk, where they would fight under different flags but with the same stubborn spirit. While the Spitfire became the symbol of British defiance, it was the Hurricane that truly bore the war's weight. Over 60% of all RAF victories during the Battle of Britain belonged to Hurricane pilots. Its construction, so often ridiculed for being outdated, had proven to be a strategic advantage. The combination of wood, steel tubing, and doped fabric meant local workshops could repair them quickly without needing specialized equipment. An aircraft grounded in the morning could be back in combat by sunset. In a war of attrition, that ability mattered more than a few extra miles per hour. Hurricanes also evolved. Later variants carried cannons, bombs, and even rockets, transforming the supposed relic into a formidable fighter bomber. In North Africa, they strafed German convoys across the desert. In Burma, they flew from rough jungle strips, where no Spitfire could hope to land. Even the Soviet Union, impressed by their resilience, flew them in Arctic conditions that froze most engines solid. The same qualities that once made engineers dismiss the design, its simplicity, toughness, and ease of repair, kept it relevant across every theater of the war. But perhaps the greatest testament to the Hurricane's value lay in the men who flew it. Many aces began their careers in its cockpit: Douglas Bader, Bob Stanford Tuck, and the Polish, Czech, and Canadian volunteers who filled RAF squadrons during Britain's darkest hour. They spoke of the Hurricane not with awe, but affection. It wasn't glamorous, but it brought them home. One pilot described it best: "The Spitfire made you look good. The Hurricane kept you alive." By the spring of 1941, the Luftwaffe had turned eastward toward the Soviet frontier, its dream of breaking Britain left in ashes. Yet the memory of that obsolete aircraft still haunted many of its pilots. The machine that refused to die, the fighter that rewrote every rule about what mattered in air combat. When the war finally turned in the Allies' favor, the Hurricane quietly began to fade from headlines. New aircraft, Typhoons, Tempests, and Mustangs, took its place on the front lines. Yet the DNA of Hawker's design never disappeared. Engineers who studied the Hurricane's combat record realized that survivability, repairability, and pilot visibility mattered as much as raw speed. Those lessons shaped a generation of aircraft that followed, from the P-47 Thunderbolt to the rugged Soviet Yak fighters that carried its spirit eastward. By war's end, over 14,500 Hurricanes had been built and flown by 21 nations. Many were left to rust on forgotten airfields or scrapped for parts. A few survived, restored decades later to flying condition. When they take to the air today, their deep, throaty Merlin engines echo across the same skies once filled with battle. Each flight is a reminder that victory in 1940 wasn't born from perfection. It came from persistence. The Luftwaffe entered the Battle of Britain believing that engineering superiority guaranteed success. They measured strength in horsepower and climb rate. The RAF measured it in courage and repair time. The Hurricane proved that the fight was won not by the aircraft that flew the fastest, but by the one that could take a hit, be patched overnight, and fly again at dawn. At 300 miles per hour, against impossible odds, the obsolete fighter of 1940 became the shield of a nation. And in doing so, it taught the world a truth the Luftwaffe never forgot. In war, durability is the highest form of genius. That if you enjoyed this deep dive into the real history behind Britain's obsolete fighter that saved a nation, don't forget to like the video. It helps more people discover these forgotten stories of courage and engineering genius. Subscribe for more true-to-life World War II and aviation documentaries every week, and ring the bell so you never miss a premiere. Tell us in the comments, which World War II aircraft do you think was the most underrated of them all and why?